It was a quiet Monday morning at the real estate office where I worked as a senior loan officer. Nothing seemed out of place as I reviewed mortgage applications until my phone lit up with a bank notification. Most people wouldn't think twice about such alerts, but this one made my blood run cold. Transfer complete, $247,000 to external account. I immediately knew something was terribly wrong. The irony wasn't lost on me as I stared at my phone screen, my hands steady despite the shock coursing through my body. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My wife Angela had just transferred our entire savings, money we'd accumulated, over 12 years of marriage, to her boyfriend's account. But here's the thing, while she thought she'd executed the perfect escape plan, she had no idea she'd just committed federal mortgage fraud. I leaned back in my leather office chair, a strange sense of calm washing over me. Most people would panic, scream, or break down at discovering their life savings had vanished along with their wife's fidelity. But I wasn't most people. After 15 years in the mortgage industry, I knew exactly what she'd done. And more. Importantly, what it meant. You see, Angela hadn't just transferred our savings. She'd moved money that was already legally committed as part of 3 pending mortgage applications. Money that had been verified, documented, and submitted to federal lenders. Money that we'd signed federal documents about just last week. In her rush to start a new life with Liam, her 26-year-old personal trainer, she'd inadvertently stepped into something much bigger than a simple divorce case. I pulled up our joint account on my second monitor, the numbers confirming what I already knew. The entire $247,000, money we'd saved for years, money I'd carefully documented in multiple mortgage applications, was gone. Angela had cleaned us out. But unlike the original applications I'd submitted, this new financial reality made every document we'd signed in the past month a federal crime. The corners of my mouth twitched slightly as I reached for my desk phone. Not to call Angela, no, she'd made her choice. Instead, I dialed a number I'd used many times in my professional capacity, the FBI's mortgage fraud hotline. You see, in her haste to embrace her newfound romance, Angela had forgotten one crucial detail. I wasn't just her husband. I was a mortgage loan officer with a duty to report financial crimes. Federal Bureau of Investigation, Mortgage Fraud Division, a crisp voice answered. I took a deep breath, my professional demeanor taking over. Yes, I need to report a fraudulent movement of verified mortgage funds, I stated calmly. The amount is $247,000, and I have all the documentation ready. As I began sharing details with the agent, my phone buzzed with a text from Angela. I'm done pretending. Liam and I deserve this fresh start. Don't bother trying to stop the transfer. By the time you read this, we'll be celebrating our new life together. I let out a quiet chuckle as I read her message. Angela thought she was writing the end of our story, but she'd actually just penned the beginning of something else entirely. She had no idea that her fresh start would come with fresh charges, federal ones. The next hour passed in a blur of focused activity. I pulled together every document, our mortgage applications, the fund verifications, the federal disclosures we'd both signed, and of course, the transfer records. Each piece of paper was another nail in the coffin of Angela's perfect escape. I knew the system, knew exactly how serious this was. While she was probably sipping champagne with Liam, celebrating their cleverness, I was methodically building a case that would catch the FBI's full attention. My colleague Robert stopped by my office, probably noticing my unusual intensity. "Everything okay, Chris?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. I looked up from my stack of documents, a small smile playing on my lips. "Just handling some unexpected paperwork," I replied, careful not to share details of an active investigation. The truth was, everything wasn't okay, but not in the way Angela had intended. She thought she'd devastated me, left me broken and penniless. Instead, she'd walked right into a trap of her own making. Her decision to transfer that money wouldn't just affect our divorce proceedings, it would trigger a federal investigation into mortgage fraud. My phone buzzed again, another text from Angela. "Don't worry about the house payments. Liam's new business venture will make us millionaires. We'll send you something when we're settled." I added the text to my growing file. Each message, each boast, each celebration of their victory was just more evidence. Angela had no idea that her dream of a new life with Liam was about to collide with federal banking laws and FBI investigators. By early afternoon, I had a meeting scheduled with FBI Special Agent Thomas Parker. As I organized the documentation chronologically, I couldn't help but reflect on the irony. Angela had always mocked my attention to detail, called me boring, for understanding banking regulations and mortgage laws. "You care more about paperwork than passion," she'd sneered recently. Now that same attention to detail would be her undoing. I closed my office door and sat down to review everything one final time. The initial mortgage applications, the asset verifications, the federal disclosures, the transfer records. Everything was in perfect order. Angela thought she'd written the final chapter of our marriage with that transfer. Instead, she'd triggered an investigation that would reshape everything she thought she knew about consequences. The calm I felt wasn't from numbness or shock. It was the certainty of knowing exactly what came next. While Angela and Liam celebrated their supposed victory, the wheels of federal justice were already turning. They thought they were writing a love story. They had no idea they were actually crafting a case file. Looking back, the signs had been there for months. Like pieces of a puzzle scattered across time, they seemed obvious now. But that's the thing about betrayal. It's always clearer in retrospect when you're no longer blinded by trust and routine. The changes in Angela had started. Subtly, almost imperceptibly, about 8 months ago, I remember the exact moment I first noticed something was different. We were at our annual mortgage company Christmas party, an event Angela had always enjoyed. She'd typically spend weeks picking out the perfect dress, eager to socialize with my colleagues and their spouses. But last December she was distant, constantly checking her phone, barely engaging in conversations she used to dominate. "I'm just tired," she'd said when I asked if everything was okay. "These corporate events are all the same anyway." Coming from someone who had once lived for such gatherings, it was like hearing a different person speak. She left early that night, claiming a headache. I stayed behind to handle some client concerns, not realizing this would become our new normal. Then came the dramatic lifestyle changes. Angela had never been particularly interested in fitness. Her idea of exercise was an occasional yoga class or a leisurely walk around the neighborhood. But suddenly, she was obsessed with working out. 6 days a week, sometimes twice a day, at that new luxury gym downtown. Elite fitness. "I just want to take better care of myself," she'd explained, rolling her eyes at my raised eyebrow. "Not everyone wants to spend their life buried in mortgage documents." The gym membership itself wasn't suspicious. It was the timing of her workouts that started to nag at me. Always early morning or late evening sessions, times when most married people would be home with their families. She'd come back looking more dressed up than anyone who'd actually exercised, her makeup perfect, her hair styled. I started noticing new workout clothes appearing in her closet, expensive brands, far more revealing than anything she'd worn before. That's when I first heard about Liam. "My trainer," she'd call him, her voice taking on a different tone whenever she mentioned his name. "He's really helping me understand my body's potential." I remember sitting at our kitchen island, reviewing a stack of mortgage applications, when she first showed me his Instagram page. Young, obviously fit, with the kind of confidence that comes from never having faced real responsibility. He's building his own business, she'd mentioned casually, too casually. Personal training is just the beginning. He has amazing plans. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I'd nodded, noting how she'd angled her phone screen away when a message notification popped up. Looking back, I should have paid more attention to how often she mentioned his amazing plans. The changes kept coming. Angela started being more secretive with her phone, changing her passwords, always keeping it face down. She'd take calls in other rooms, her voice dropping to a whisper. Our joint credit card statement showed lunches at places she'd never mentioned, always for 2 people, always during her supposed workout times. Her appearance changed too. New clothes started appearing, not just workout gear, but expensive dresses and lingerie I never saw her wear. Her style shifted to something younger, more daring. She changed her hair, started wearing different perfume. Small changes that seemed innocent enough alone, but together painted a picture I didn't want to see. Our conversations became superficial, when we had them at all. She stopped asking about my day, about the mortgage applications I was processing, about our future plans. The woman who used to joke about being my personal financial advisor now seemed irritated whenever I mentioned money or our investments. "Not everything is about mortgages and savings, Chris," she'd snap, especially when I'd bring up our plan to start our own brokerage. One particular evening stands out in my memory. I was working late, reviewing some federal lending guidelines. For a complex mortgage case, Angela had said she was going to her usual evening workout session. Around 9 p.m., I decided to surprise her with dinner, thinking we could reconnect over a late meal. I called Elite Fitness, only to learn they closed at 8 p.m. When she came home at 10:30, her excuse about post-workout coffee with gym friends came too quickly, too rehearsed. The lies became more frequent, more elaborate. Weekend workshops that never showed up on the gym's schedule, late-night training sessions that couldn't be verified. Emergency meetings with friends who, when I happened to run into them, knew nothing about these supposed gatherings. Our joint account activities started showing strange patterns too. Small withdrawals at first, then larger ones. Shopping sprees, at stores she'd never mentioned visiting. When I asked, there was always an explanation. Girls' nights out, self-care expenses, gym equipment. As a mortgage loan officer, I was trained to spot financial irregularities. But as a husband, I wanted to believe her explanations. Then came the comments about our age difference. Angela was 5 years younger than me, something that had never seemed to matter before. But suddenly, she started making remarks about feeling stuck, about missing out on life experiences. "Sometimes I wonder what it would be like to be with someone more spontaneous," she'd said one evening, her eyes fixed on her phone. "Someone who isn't always worried about mortgage rates and credit scores." The final red flag came 3 weeks ago. I was organizing our home office, preparing documentation for our latest mortgage applications, when I found a brochure for a luxury condo development downtown. It was marked with highlights and notes in Angela's handwriting. Not our usual joint. Planning but solo dreams. Next to the price listing, she'd written, "L says possible with investment returns." Even then, I didn't confront her. Years of handling sensitive financial documents had taught me the importance of having complete information before taking action. Instead, I started paying closer attention to our accounts, noting every transaction, every withdrawal. I made copies of our mortgage applications, our asset verifications, every federal document we'd signed. The signs had been there all along, in her changed passwords, her new clothes, her lies about the gym, her sudden interest in investment opportunities I'd never heard of. She thought she was being clever, covering her tracks, but she'd forgotten who she was dealing with. As a mortgage loan officer, I'd seen countless cases of financial deception. I knew the patterns, the red flags, the telltale signs. What Angela didn't realize was that her plan had a fatal flaw. In her rush to start a new life with Liam, she'd overlooked the fact that our savings weren't just personal funds anymore. They were verified assets in active mortgage applications. Applications that involved federal oversight and serious legal implications. As I sat in my office that Monday morning, watching our savings disappear, I realized that all these signs hadn't been leading to a simple story of infidelity. They'd been building towards something much bigger, a federal crime that would catch the FBI's full attention. While Angela thought she was carefully orchestrating her escape, I had been building my own foundation of evidence and protection. It wasn't just instinct that drove me. 15 years in the mortgage industry had taught me the importance of documentation, especially when federal regulations were involved. My preparation had begun the day I found that luxury condo brochure. After discovering Angela's hidden plans, I'd quietly reached out to Nicole, an FBI forensic accountant I'd worked with on previous mortgage fraud cases. We met for coffee at a small cafe 3 blocks from my office, far from any of Angela's usual haunts. Document everything, Nicole had advised, stirring her latte thoughtfully. Bank statements, mortgage applications, asset verifications, anything with both your signatures. If she's planning what you suspect, it won't just be about the money. It'll be about federal lending laws. She'd slid me her card with a direct number, adding, "The moment you see any suspicious transfers, call me." That same afternoon, I'd started creating what I called my insurance file. Every mortgage application we'd submitted in the past 6 months went into it. Each one required asset verification, each one had both our signatures, and each one was subject to federal oversight. I made copies of everything: bank statements, tax returns, federal disclosures. Angela had signed all of them, legally attesting to the accuracy of our financial information. I also began documenting her gym schedule, or rather, her lies about it. Times she claimed to be at Elite Fitness when the facility was closed. Days she said she had training sessions that didn't appear on the gym's schedule. Each discrepancy went into the file, along with timestamps and dates. It wasn't about catching her in an affair. It was about establishing a pattern of deception that would become crucial later. Robert, my colleague in the mortgage office, had unknowingly helped build my case. "Hey, Chris," he'd said one day, "didn't Angela say she was at a gym workshop last Thursday? Because I swear I saw her at the Grand Hotel with some young guy." I'd thanked him casually, then added his statement to my growing collection of evidence. The real strategic move came when I noticed Angela's increasing interest in our joint account. She'd started checking the balance more frequently, asking detailed questions about our savings. That's when I contacted Brian, my old friend from the Banking Oversight Committee. "If she does try anything," Brian had warned, "it won't just be about the divorce, moving verified mortgage funds after signing federal disclosures. That's a different ballgame entirely." He helped me set up transaction alerts on all our accounts, ensuring I'd know the moment any large transfers occurred. Also took steps to protect my professional reputation. As a senior loan officer, my name was on those mortgage applications. I drafted a detailed memo explaining my suspicions and the steps I was taking to monitor the situation. This went into a sealed envelope and into my company's secure files, dated and witnessed by our compliance officer. Then there were the federal disclosure forms, the real ace up my sleeve. Angela had signed them just last week, legally verifying our assets for 3 separate mortgage applications. The forms clearly stated that any material change in financial status had to be reported immediately. Moving the money without reporting. It wouldn't just be a divorce issue, it would be federal fraud. I'd even recorded our last conversation about the mortgage applications. Angela sitting at our kitchen table, barely paying attention as she signed the forms. "Yes, I understand it's a federal document," she'd said impatiently. Her phone buzzing with messages she was clearly eager to check. Can we hurry this up? I have a training session with Liam. That recording, while seemingly innocent, established two crucial facts. She knew she was signing federal documents, and she was already involved with Liam at the time. Both would become important later. My preparation extended to our home security system as well. I'd installed cameras in our home office where we kept our financial documents. The footage showed Angela going through mortgage paperwork late at night, taking photos of bank statements and account numbers. Each image was time-stamped and backed up to a secure server. I'd also kept records of every suspicious purchase, every unexplained absence, every lie about her whereabouts, not because I was obsessed, but because I knew that in cases of financial fraud, patterns mattered. The FBI wouldn't just be interested in the final transfer. They'd want to see the build-up, the preparation, the intent. The most crucial piece of my preparation had been the consultation with Thomas, the FBI special agent who specialized in mortgage fraud. We'd met under the guise of discussing a complicated loan case, but our real conversation had been about what constituted federal financial crimes. The key is intent, Thomas had explained, leaning back in his chair. If someone moves verified mortgage funds after signing federal disclosures, knowing those funds are part of active applications, that's not just a civil matter. That's federal fraud. He'd walked me through the exact protocols to follow if I ever encountered such a situation. I'd taken detailed notes during that meeting, adding them to my growing file. I'd also saved every email exchange with Thomas, establishing a clear timeline of my attempts to stay within legal boundaries while investigating my suspicions. Even my seeming inaction had been strategic. I hadn't confronted Angela about her lies, hadn't revealed my suspicions about her relationship with Liam. Instead, I'd continued processing mortgage applications, continued having her sign federal disclosures, continued building the legal framework that would eventually become a federal case. Each time she signed a new mortgage application, each time she verified our assets on federal forms, she was strengthening my case without realizing it. Her signatures on those documents would become the foundation of the FBI's investigation. I'd also carefully documented our joint account activity. Every deposit, every withdrawal, all clearly marked and categorized. The money she would eventually transfer wasn't just our savings, it was verified funds for federal mortgage applications. The distinction would prove crucial. My preparation had extended to our professional circles as well. I'd quietly informed our company's compliance officer about potential irregularities, ensuring there was a record of my concerns. I documented every conversation, every email, building a clear trail of my attempts to maintain professional integrity. The final piece had been setting up the alert system that would notify me the moment any large transfers occurred. When that notification came through that Monday morning, it wasn't just announcing Angela's betrayal, it was triggering a carefully orchestrated response plan. All of this preparation, all of this documentation had led to this moment. While Angela thought she was orchestrating a simple escape with her young lover, she'd actually stepped into a carefully laid groundwork of federal banking laws and FBI protocols. She thought she was writing a story of liberation. In reality, she was walking into a case file I'd been building for months. Every document, every recording, every piece of evidence had been gathered and organized, ready for the moment she made her move. As I sat in my office that Monday morning, watching the notification of her transfer flash across my screen, I knew that my preparation was about to pay off. Angela thought she'd executed the perfect escape plan. What she'd actually done was trigger a federal investigation that had been primed and ready for months. The groundwork was laid, the evidence was organized, and the FBI was just one phone call away. Angela's fresh start was about to collide with federal banking laws, and I had made sure every piece of documentation was in place for what would come next. The transfer notification was just the beginning. Within hours of emptying our joint account, Angela's confidence began spilling out in a series of increasingly brazen texts and social media posts. Each message, each boast, each celebration of her supposed victory only added to the mounting evidence of federal fraud. "Living my best life," she posted on Instagram, tagging herself at the Grand Hotel's rooftop bar. The photo showed her and Liam toasting with champagne, the afternoon sun glinting off her wedding ring, the same ring that appeared in photos attached to our recent mortgage applications. The timestamp on the post matched exactly with the time of the fraudulent transfer. Her text messages were even more incriminating. "Finally free from all that mortgage nonsense," she wrote. "Liam's investment plan is going to make us rich. You can keep your boring federal regulations and paperwork." Each message demonstrated not just betrayal, but clear awareness of what she was doing with federally verified funds. The money trail told its own story. The $247,000 transfer hadn't gone directly to Liam's account. Angela had tried to be clever, routing it through two different banks first. What she didn't realize was that each transfer created a clearer paper trail for the FBI to follow. Her attempt at financial sophistication only proved premeditation. "We're calling it our Freedom Fund," she texted, following up with a photo of herself at another bank, presumably setting up new accounts. "Don't bother trying to stop it. By the time you figure out what's happening, we'll be too far ahead." The irony of her posing inside a federally insured bank while committing mortgage fraud wasn't lost on me. Liam joined in the victory lap, posting about their new venture and how they were investing in their future. His social media was suddenly full of posts about financial freedom and escaping the corporate grind. For someone about to face federal charges, he seemed remarkably pleased with himself. Their celebrations continued throughout the day. Angela made sure to document every moment, perhaps thinking she was rubbing salt in my wounds. Instead, she was building the FBI's case file. Each post, each purchase, each transfer created a timeline of criminal intent that would become crucial evidence. By early afternoon, they'd checked into the Grand Hotel's premium suite, paid for with our joint credit card, naturally. Angela made sure to post photos of the view, the room service champagne, even the hotel's welcome note addressed to both of them. Each image was time-stamped, each charge documented, each piece of evidence adding to the federal case. "Starting fresh with someone who understands ambition," she captioned one photo. The image showed Liam lounging on the hotel bed, surrounded by printouts of what appeared to be investment schemes. In the corner of the photo, clearly visible, was a page from our most recent mortgage application, the one she'd signed just last week. Their overconfidence led to even more mistakes. Angela began transferring smaller amounts to various accounts, apparently trying to obscure the original sum. Each transfer created another documented violation, another piece of evidence for the FBI to follow. She thought she was covering her tracks. She was actually creating a clear map of criminal intent. "We should thank you, really," came another text from Angela. "Your obsession with documentation taught me how to move money around, though I have to say, Liam's way is much more exciting than your boring mortgage protocols." The message was followed by a photo of them at the hotel bar, toasting with expensive cocktails, paid for with funds that were supposed to be locked into federal mortgage applications. Then came the email, perhaps the most damning piece of evidence. Yet Angela, apparently feeling invincible, actually detailed their plans in writing. She explained how they would use the money for Liam's investment opportunity, how they had timed the transfer to avoid detection, how they had specifically waited until after the mortgage applications were submitted. "It's perfect timing," she wrote. "The money was just sitting there, verified and ready for those stupid mortgage applications. But we found a better use for it. Liam says his investment will double it within months. Every word demonstrated knowledge of the federal verification process. Every sentence proved intent to misuse verified funds. Their celebration continued into the evening. More posts appeared. Dinner at an expensive restaurant, shopping bags from luxury stores, even a receipt for airline tickets. Angela and Liam were creating a documented timeline of their spending spree with federally verified funds, seemingly oblivious to the legal implications. "Freedom looks good on us," Angela posted, sharing a photo of their hotel room scattered with shopping bags. The caption continued, "Sometimes you have to break free from conventional rules to find happiness." The FBI would later note how perfectly that caption captured their criminal intent. As night fell, they became even more reckless. Liam started posting about their investment strategy, complete with screenshots of questionable financial schemes. Each post, each photo, each message added another layer to the federal case building against them. Their digital trail was becoming a prosecutor's dream. "We should send Chris a thank you card," Liam posted, tagging Angela. "His careful saving gave us the perfect startup capital." The post included a photo of them with shopping bags, standing in front of the hotel's signature fountain. The FBI would later use this image to establish timeline and location. Around midnight, Angela sent what she probably thought would be her final message to me. "I know you're probably going through all your precious paperwork, trying to figure out how to fix this. But some things can't be fixed, Chris. Some things aren't meant to be controlled by rules and regulations. Liam and I are proof of that." What she didn't realize was that every word of that message would be examined by FBI analysts. Every phrase would be used to prove her awareness of the federal regulations she was violating. Her attempt at a dramatic exit statement would become evidence of premeditated fraud. Their victory lap had turned into a self-documenting crime spree. Each celebration, each purchase, each transfer created a stronger case for the FBI. Angela and Liam thought they were broadcasting their triumph. They were actually recording their own downfall. As I sat in my home office that night, organizing their social media posts, messages, and financial transactions into evidence files, I couldn't help but appreciate the irony. They thought they were being bold and clever, breaking free from rules and regulations. Instead, they were creating the most well-documented case of mortgage fraud my FBI contacts had ever seen. Tomorrow would bring federal agents and formal investigations. But for tonight, I let them celebrate. Let them enjoy their moment of supposed victory. Let them document every moment, every purchase, every transfer. Each piece of evidence they created would only make the FBI's job easier. Angela's freedom fund was about to become Exhibit A in a federal fraud case, and she had no idea she was the one documenting it all. The first cracks in Angela and Liam's perfect escape plan appeared early the next morning. I was already at my office reviewing case files with FBI Special Agent Thomas when the frantic texts started arriving. "What's going on with the credit cards?" Angela's message flashed across my screen. "They're all being declined." The timestamp showed 8:47 a.m., precisely when most luxury hotels process their overnight charges. I could picture her at the Grand Hotel's checkout counter, probably dressed in her newly purchased clothes, her confidence wavering as card after card was rejected. Special Agent Thomas raised an eyebrow as he reviewed the credit card reports I'd prepared. "All these charges," he noted, "made after she signed the federal verification forms. This is exactly what we look for in fraud cases." He was particularly interested in the timeline, how the spending spree had begun immediately after the transfer of federally verified mortgage funds. The next message came from an unknown number, Liam's phone. "Look, man, there's been a misunderstanding. Angela says you're overreacting. Just unlock the cards and we can talk about this like adults." His attempt at maturity might have been more convincing if he hadn't been actively spending fraudulently obtained funds less than 12 hours earlier. By 9:30 a.m., the Grand Hotel had called to verify the charges from the previous night. "I'm afraid I'll have to report these as fraudulent," I explained to the manager. "The cards were used without authorization after the account holder committed federal mortgage fraud." The manager's tone changed immediately. He'd dealt with fraud cases before, but usually not ones involving federal charges. Angela's next message was less confident. "This is ridiculous, Chris. You can't just freeze all our accounts." But I hadn't frozen anything. The banks had done that automatically when the FBI opened their investigation. Federal mortgage fraud tends to get financial institutions' attention rather quickly. The series of declined charges told their story of planned extravagance. The Grand Hotel suite, room service champagne, a scheduled spa day, first-class flights to Miami, down payments on a luxury condo. Each rejection was another crack in their illusion of easy escape. "Mrs. Harrison," the Grand Hotel's front desk manager called me directly, "is becoming quite agitated. She's demanding access to the room safe and insisting the declined charges are a bank error." I advised him to contact hotel security and notify them of the situation. "You should also know," I added, "that the FBI will be arriving shortly to document the charges." Around 10:15 a.m., Angela's mother, Camille, called. "Christopher," she began, her voice carrying that unique blend of concern and disapproval only mothers-in-law can achieve. "Angela says you're having some kind of breakdown, freezing accounts, calling the FBI. This isn't like you." "Did Angela mention she transferred $247,000 of federally verified mortgage funds?" I asked calmly. "Or that she used those funds to commit bank fraud?" The long silence on the other end suggested Angela had left out some key details in her version of events. The hotel's security camera footage, which would later become evidence, showed Angela and Liam's growing panic as reality set in. They made dozens of calls, paced the lobby, argued in whispered but intense conversations. Their body language told the story their social media posts hadn't, the dawning realization that their perfect escape wasn't going as planned. By 11 a.m., their social media confidence had evaporated. The celebratory posts stopped. The photos of champagne and shopping sprees disappeared. Their digital victory laps screeched to a halt as the reality of federal investigations sank in. "You have no right," Angela texted at 11:23 a.m. "That money was in our joint account. I'm entitled to it." She still didn't understand, or didn't want to understand, that the moment she signed those mortgage applications, the money's status had changed. It wasn't just about marital assets anymore, it was about federal banking laws. Liam's investment scheme started unraveling too. The guaranteed returns he'd promised Angela looked a lot less guaranteed in the cold light of day. His frantic calls to his investment partners went unanswered. The financial genius who was going to double their money couldn't even cover the hotel bill. The hotel's front desk reported more drama around noon. Angela tried to charge their lunch to the room, insisting they were good for the money, that this was all just a misunderstanding. The staff, already alerted to the fraud investigation, politely but firmly declined. "Your wife and her companion are requesting to extend their stay," the hotel manager informed me. Should I inform them about the FBI's interest in their current charges? I advised him to simply decline the extension. Let them figure it out themselves. Their next attempt was both desperate and ill-advised. Angela tried to withdraw cash from an ATM using our joint debit card. The transaction was automatically flagged, not by me, but by the FBI's fraud monitoring system. Each attempted withdrawal created another document for the federal investigation. Around 1:30 p.m., Angela's sister Nicole called. Unlike her mother, Nicole worked in banking and understood the implications immediately. "Federal mortgage fraud?" she asked, her voice heavy with disbelief. What was she thinking? The answer, of course, was that Angela hadn't been thinking, at least not about consequences. The afternoon brought more desperate attempts to access funds. Angela tried opening new accounts at 3 different banks, only to be declined each time. Her name had already been flagged in the federal banking system. Each attempt was documented, each rejection added to the growing evidence file. Liam's confidence crumbled further when his own bank called about suspicious activities. His account, which had received the transferred funds, was now under federal scrutiny. His dreams of playing financial wizard with fraudulently obtained money were dissolving in real time. "This isn't fair," Angela texted at 2:45 p.m. "You're just doing this to control me." The irony of her accusation wasn't lost on me. She had committed federal fraud, documented her crimes on social media, and was now playing the victim because she couldn't access illegally obtained funds. By late afternoon, their situation at the Grand Hotel had become untenable. With no access to funds and a growing bill they couldn't pay, they were facing the humiliating prospect of being escorted out by security. Their luxury escape was ending not with a bang, but with a whimper. "Perhaps," Agent Thomas observed as we reviewed their declined transactions, "they should have spent less time posting about their victory and more time understanding federal banking regulations." His dry humor matched the situation perfectly. The final blow came when Angela tried to access our investment accounts, probably hoping to find some overlooked source of funds. Instead, she found them locked down tight. Standard procedure when federal fraud is suspected. Her financial options were evaporating one by one. As the day drew to a close, the contrast between their morning confidence and evening desperation was stark. The couple who had celebrated with champagne and shopping sprees was now facing closed accounts, declined cards, and an active FBI investigation. Their Freedom Fund had become a liability. Each charge they'd made, each transfer they'd initiated, was now evidence in a federal case. Their celebration had lasted less than 24 hours, but its consequences would last much longer. The wheels of justice were turning, slowly but inexorably. While Angela and Liam faced their first night of real consequences, I sat in my office, organizing their failed transactions into evidence files. Tomorrow would bring more revelations, more consequences, more reality checks. But for now, the first reversal was complete. Their perfect escape plan had hit the solid wall of federal law enforcement, and the cracks were showing. The impact of Angela's actions spread through our social and professional circles like ripples in a pond. Each new person who learned about the situation brought another layer of consequence, another audience to their unfolding drama. By midweek, the story had taken on a life of its own. Our real estate office was the first to feel the effects. Robert, who'd worked with me for years, had to reschedule all our joint client meetings. "I can't believe it," he kept saying, shaking his head as he reviewed the mortgage applications Angela had signed. She really thought she could transfer verified funds and no one would notice. The consequences hit Elite Fitness next. The gym where Angela and Liam's relationship had blossomed suddenly found itself under scrutiny. The manager, after learning about the federal investigation, provided security footage showing Angela's actual attendance times, which rarely matched her claimed workout schedule. More importantly, it showed her entering Liam's office after hours, when the gym was officially closed. "We've terminated Mr. Anderson's employment," the gym's director informed me, referring to Liam by his full name. "Our trainers are not permitted to engage in financial dealings with clients, let alone participate in federal fraud." The director was particularly concerned about liability issues, given that some of their planning had happened on gym property. Angela's professional life imploded spectacularly. Her marketing firm placed her on immediate administrative leave when they learned about the FBI investigation. "We can't have someone handling client accounts who's under investigation for financial fraud," her boss explained when he called to verify the details. Angela's corporate email was disabled, her projects reassigned, her office packed up by HR. Liam's situation wasn't any better. Not only had he lost his job at Elite Fitness, but his personal training certification board was reviewing his license. Engaging in financial fraud with a client raises serious ethical concerns, the board's letter stated. His dreams of building a training empire were crumbling before they'd even begun, their social circle fractured along predictable lines. The younger crowd that had celebrated their brave escape on social media suddenly went quiet when the words "federal investigation" started circulating. The champagne-soaked posts celebrating Angela's freedom were hastily deleted. Though the FBI had already archived everything, even Angela's most loyal friends started distancing themselves. Her best friend Megan, who had initially supported her decision to leave, called me in tears. "She told us you were controlling her money, that she needed to escape," Megan admitted. "She never mentioned anything about mortgage applications or federal documents." The country club, where we'd been members for years, also took action. Angela's attempt to charge expenses to our club account triggered a review of her membership status. The board, citing their ethics clause, suspended her access. "We can't have members using the club to conduct fraudulent activities," the membership director explained, referring to Angela's lunch meetings with Liam, where they'd planned their scheme. Family reactions were particularly intense. Angela's mother, Camille, after her initial defense of her daughter, fell into a shocked silence when shown the evidence. The federal documents, the transfer records, the social media posts, it painted a picture she couldn't ignore. "I didn't raise her to be this person," she kept saying, her voice heavy with disappointment. Angela's father, Robert, a retired bank executive, was less surprised but more angry. "She knows better," he said during our lengthy phone call. "I spent 30 years in banking. She grew up hearing about financial regulations. This isn't just about leaving you. She committed federal fraud." His professional background made the situation even more humiliating for him. The ripples reached unexpected places. Our insurance agent called to discuss policy implications. Our investment advisor had to file reports about potential fraud. Even our family doctor's office got involved when Angela tried to charge medical records requests to our joint account, only to have them declined. Local gossip turned surprisingly technical. People who'd never shown interest in banking regulations were suddenly discussing federal mortgage fraud over coffee. The story had everything: romance, betrayal, crime, and consequences. Each retelling added new details, though the core facts remained damning enough. Liam's family entered the picture, adding another layer of drama. His parents, horrified at their son's involvement in federal fraud, tried to distance themselves. "We thought he was just dating an older woman," his mother said when she called to apologize. "We had no idea about the mortgage funds or the federal documents." The banking community, where I'd built my career, responded with professional interest. Several colleagues called to discuss the case, not for gossip, but as a textbook example of fraud detection. Angela's actions would likely end up in training materials, teaching future mortgage officers what to watch for. Our neighbors, who'd witnessed Angela's late-night meetings with Liam in his car outside our house, now understood what they'd been seeing. The neighborhood watch group quietly provided their security camera footage to the FBI. Adding to the mountain of evidence, former clients called too, worried about their own mortgage applications. I assured them that their files were secure, that Angela's fraud only affected our personal accounts. Still, the concern in their voices showed how widely the impact had spread. The local real estate community treated the situation as a cautionary tale. At a regional meeting, several agents discussed implementing stricter verification procedures. Angela's attempt to exploit the mortgage system had inadvertently led to improved security measures. Even our regular restaurants felt the ripple effect. The maitre d' at our favorite bistro, where Angela had often met Liam for training discussions, provided receipts showing their meetings, all charged to our joint account, all during times she'd claimed to be at the gym. The religious community where we'd been casual members responded with both concern and judgment. The pastor called to offer counseling, but also to inform us that Angela's planned charity fundraiser would need new leadership. "We can't have someone under federal investigation handling donations," he explained. As the week progressed, the ripples continued spreading. Each new day brought more consequences, more reactions, more revelations. Angela and Liam's dream of a clean escape had turned into a community-wide cautionary tale. Their story became a topic at professional conferences, analyzed by financial experts and legal scholars. What they'd thought would be a simple transfer of funds had become a case study in federal fraud detection. The ripple effect touched every aspect of their lives, from the professional to the personal, from the practical to the social. Their actions had created waves that would continue to spread, affecting people and institutions they'd never even considered. And through it all, the FBI's investigation continued, gathering strength from each new revelation, each new witness, each new piece of evidence. What Angela and Liam had dismissed as mere banking regulations had become the center of a federal case that would define their lives for years to come. The federal courthouse stood imposing against the morning sky, its marble columns a stark reminder of the authority they represented. Inside courtroom 4B, Angela and Liam were about to learn exactly what their Freedom Fund had cost them. The FBI's investigation had moved with remarkable efficiency, leading to this preliminary hearing just 10 days after the initial transfer. Special Agent Thomas sat beside me, his case files meticulously organized. Each document told part of the story: the mortgage applications, the federal disclosures, the transfer records, the social media posts. But it was the newest evidence that would prove most damaging. Surveillance footage from 3 different banks showing Angela and Liam attempting to move the funds through various accounts. "All rise," the bailiff announced as Judge Sarah Mitchell entered the courtroom. Angela, seated with her hastily hired defense attorney, straightened her blazer. One of her recent purchases, likely made with fraudulently obtained funds. Liam, sporting a new suit that didn't quite fit, looked significantly less confident than he had in his social media posts about financial freedom. The proceedings began with the prosecution's opening statement. The federal prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman named Nicole Reynolds, laid out the case methodically. "Your Honor, this is not a simple case of marital assets being divided. This is a clear instance of federal mortgage fraud, documented extensively by the defendants themselves." Angela's attorney attempted to paint it as a misunderstanding. "My client was merely accessing funds from a joint account," he argued, his voice lacking conviction. "She had no intent to commit fraud." Judge Mitchell's raised eyebrows suggested she wasn't buying it. The evidence presentation began with the mortgage applications. Each document showed Angela's signature, each one dated within the past month. The federal disclosures came next, clearly stating that the verified funds could not be moved without proper notification. "And here," Prosecutor Reynolds continued, "we have Mrs. Harrison's social media posts from the day of the transfer." The courtroom screen displayed Angela's celebratory photos, her boasts about outsmarting the boring mortgage regulations, her detailed descriptions of their plans for the money. Each post time-stamped, each one demonstrating clear intent. Liam shifted uncomfortably as his own social media activity was presented. His posts about their investment strategy and how they'd liberated the funds from federal oversight now seemed particularly ill-advised. The judge's expression grew sterner with each new piece of evidence. The bank surveillance footage proved especially damaging. Multiple cameras had captured Angela and Liam visiting different branches, attempting to obscure the money trail. The defendants showed clear premeditation, Special Agent Thomas testified. They deliberately attempted to conceal the movement of federally verified funds. Their text messages were next. Angela's smug announcements about taking the money, her taunts about federal regulations, her detailed plans for spending the verified funds, all projected on the courtroom screen. Her attorney's attempts to object were overruled. These weren't privileged communications. They were evidence of criminal intent. The hotel receipts told their own story. Charges for luxury suites, expensive dinners, shopping sprees, all made with money that was supposed to be secured for federal mortgage applications. Each receipt showed timestamp and location, creating a clear timeline of their spending spree. Then came the financial experts. A forensic accountant detailed how Angela and Liam had attempted to move the money through multiple accounts, trying to obscure its origin. This wasn't impulsive, the accountant testified. This was a calculated attempt to misuse federally verified funds. Elite Fitness provided their own evidence. Security footage showed Angela and Liam meeting after hours, reviewing financial documents in his office. The gym's director testified about finding mortgage paperwork in Liam's desk after his termination. They were using our facility to plan federal fraud, he stated. The bank representatives were next, describing how Angela had accessed our accounts immediately after signing federal verification forms. She withdrew the funds less than 72 hours. After attesting they would remain in place for the mortgage applications. The bank officer testified, "That's a clear violation of federal banking regulations." Angela's face grew paler with each new piece of evidence. The confident woman who had celebrated her escape just days ago was now confronting the reality of federal prosecution. Liam, meanwhile, had developed a nervous habit of loosening his tie, as if it were getting tighter with each damning revelation. Their attempted defense crumbled further when the prosecution presented emails between them, discussing how to move the money without detection. "We need to wait until after he submits the mortgage paperwork," Angela had written. "Then we can transfer everything before anyone notices." Clear evidence of premeditation. The hotel manager's testimony proved particularly compelling. He described their lavish spending, their attempts to charge expenses even after cards were declined, their increasingly desperate attempts to access additional funds. Each incident documented, each attempt recorded. Special Agent Thomas's presentation of the FBI's findings was devastating in its thoroughness. Bank records, transfer documentation, surveillance footage, social media posts, all woven together into an airtight case of federal fraud. The defendants didn't just take the money, he explained. They documented every step of their criminal activity. When Angela's attorney attempted to argue that she didn't understand the implications of moving verified mortgage funds, Judge Mitchell interrupted. "Are you suggesting that your client, who signed multiple federal disclosure forms explicitly explaining these regulations, was somehow unaware of the consequences?" Liam's defense was even weaker. His attorney tried to argue that as a personal trainer, he couldn't be expected to understand banking regulations. This fell apart when the prosecution produced his social media posts, bragging about how they had outsmarted the federal banking system. The surveillance footage from our home office proved particularly damning. Angela and Liam, caught on camera discussing the mortgage applications, clearly planning their timing. "We just need to wait until these are submitted," Angela was heard saying. "Then the money is ours." By the time the prosecution rested its case, the outcome was clear. Judge Mitchell's expression had moved from stern to severe. "I've seen many fraud cases," she stated, "but rarely one where the defendants so thoroughly documented their own criminal activity. The preliminary hearing concluded with the judge's decision to move forward with full criminal proceedings. "The evidence of federal mortgage fraud is overwhelming," she declared. "The defendants' own actions and documentation leave no room for doubt about their intentions." As the bailiff led them out, Angela finally seemed to grasp the magnitude of their situation. This wasn't just about leaving a marriage or starting fresh. This was about federal crimes, thoroughly documented and professionally prosecuted. Their Freedom Fund had bought them a very different kind of future than they'd planned. The days following the preliminary hearing brought a cascade of consequences that neither Angela nor Liam had anticipated. The federal case had opened floodgates that would drown their dreams of an easy escape, affecting every aspect of their lives in ways they never imagined. The first major blow came from the federal banking system. With both Angela and Liam now officially under investigation for mortgage fraud, their financial lives effectively ceased to exist. Every bank account, credit card, and investment portfolio connected to either of them was flagged. They couldn't so much as open a checking account without triggering alerts. "It's standard procedure," Special Agent Thomas explained as we reviewed the latest reports. "Once someone's involved in federal mortgage fraud, they're flagged in the system. Every financial institution in the country gets notified." He showed me the alert that had gone out. Angela and Liam's names were now in a database that would follow them for years. Their professional lives crumbled next. Angela's marketing firm, which had initially put her on administrative leave, moved to terminate her employment completely. "We can't have someone facing federal fraud charges handling client accounts," her former boss explained. "The liability is too great." Her company email was permanently disabled, her personal belongings shipped to her mother's address. Liam's situation was even more dire. Not only had he lost his position at Elite Fitness, but his personal training certification was suspended pending review. The certification board's letter was unequivocal. Engaging in federal fraud with a client represents a serious breach of professional ethics. His dreams of building a fitness empire had effectively ended before they began. The real estate community, where I'd built my career, treated the case as a cautionary tale. Several mortgage companies updated their verification procedures specifically in response to Angela's scheme. Her attempt to exploit the system had inadvertently led to stronger safeguards against similar fraud attempts. "We're using your case as a training example," Robert told me during a team meeting. "It's perfect for teaching new loan officers what to watch for." The irony wasn't lost on me. Angela's escape plan was now helping prevent others from attempting the same fraud. Their legal troubles multiplied as various institutions began filing their own charges. The credit card companies initiated fraud investigations for the charges made after the initial transfer. The Grand Hotel filed a civil suit for unpaid charges and damages. Even Elite Fitness began legal proceedings for breach of contract and professional misconduct. Angela's mother, Camille, who had initially defended her daughter, now faced her own social fallout. Her bridge club, where she'd bragged about Angela's marketing career for years, became unbearable. "How do you sit there playing cards while everyone whispers about your daughter's federal fraud case?" she asked during one of her increasingly frequent calls. Liam's family distanced themselves completely. His parents, retired school teachers, who'd prided themselves on their son's supposed success, stopped taking his calls. His sister, Nicole, who worked in banking herself, was particularly harsh. "You didn't just commit fraud," she told him. "You documented it on social media. What were you thinking?" The financial consequences kept mounting. The FBI's forensic accountants traced every dollar of the fraudulently transferred funds, following the money through various accounts and purchases. Each transaction they uncovered added to the growing list of charges. "They tried to be clever about moving the money," the lead forensic accountant explained, showing me their transaction map. "But every transfer Every purchase, every attempt to hide the funds just created more evidence. The resulting financial analysis would become part of the federal case file. Their social media presence, once filled with boasts about their fresh start and financial freedom, went dark. But the damage was done. Screenshots of their celebratory posts, their taunts about outsmarting federal regulations, their documented spending spree, all of it had been preserved as evidence. Local law enforcement got involved when the Grand Hotel reported their unpaid bills and unauthorized charges. What had started as a federal banking case now included local criminal charges. Detective Brian Thompson, who handled financial crimes for the local police, added their case to his files. It's rare to see suspects document their own crimes so thoroughly, Detective Thompson remarked as he reviewed their social media posts. Usually, we have to work harder to prove intent. Angela and Liam had provided law enforcement with a documented timeline of their criminal activities. Their attempt to rent a new apartment failed spectacularly. The standard background check revealed their pending federal charges and no property management company would touch them. They ended up staying in a budget motel, a far cry from the luxury lifestyle they'd imagined. Even their phones turned against them. The FBI obtained warrants for their communication records, revealing hundreds of messages planning the fraud. Each text, each email, each social media message became another piece of evidence demonstrating their premeditation. The fitness community, where Liam had built his reputation, quickly ostracized him. Other gyms refused to hire him, citing the pending federal charges. His client base evaporated as news of his involvement in the fraud spread. Former clients came forward with stories of him discussing investment schemes during training sessions. Angela's professional network collapsed. Marketing firms in the area, all aware of the federal case, refused to consider her applications. Her industry contacts stopped returning her calls. The reputation she'd spent years building disappeared, almost overnight. Their joint credit card accounts, which they'd used for their celebration spree, generated their own legal problems. The card company's fraud departments opened investigations, adding to the growing stack of legal issues they faced. The local business community treated them as a cautionary tale. Chamber of Commerce meetings included discussions of financial security, often referencing their case without naming them directly. Their attempt to beat the system had become a warning to others. Even their medical records became part of the investigation. The FBI subpoenaed their healthcare providers, revealing appointments and conversations that supported the fraud timeline. Angela's therapist's notes, which mentioned her plans to leave and take the money, became potential evidence. The domino effect reached their insurance coverage. Their auto insurance was cancelled due to the fraud investigation. Their health insurance, tied to Angela's now terminated employment, lapsed. Even their renter's insurance declined renewal, citing the pending federal charges. Each new day brought fresh consequences, new revelations, additional charges. What they'd thought would be a simple transfer of funds had triggered a cascade of legal, financial, and personal disasters that would define their lives for years to come. As I sat in my office reviewing the latest updates with Special Agent Thomas, the full scope of their downfall became clear. Their Freedom Fund had bought them something very different from the fresh start they'd imagined. It had purchased them a future filled with federal charges, legal proceedings, and lasting consequences. The relationship between Angela and Liam began to unravel as rapidly as their legal situation deteriorated. What had seemed like a passionate romance built on dreams of shared wealth and endless possibilities crumbled under the harsh reality of federal prosecution and mounting consequences. Their first major fight erupted in the lobby of their budget motel 3 weeks after the preliminary hearing. "You said you knew what you were doing," Liam shouted, not caring who heard. "You said the money was yours to take." Several guests recorded the argument on their phones, and the footage eventually made its way to the FBI's growing evidence file. Angela's response was equally heated. "Me? You're the one who claimed to have all these amazing investment plans. Double the money in months, remember?" Her voice dripped with bitter sarcasm. "Now we can't even get a checking account." The motel's security camera captured their entire exchange, which their respective lawyers would later review with growing concern. The strain of their new reality began to show in various ways. Liam, used to projecting an image of successful personal trainer, now had to wear the same suits to court appearances. Angela, who had prided herself on her professional appearance, was reduced to shopping at discount stores. Their Instagram-worthy romance had devolved into arguments about basic necessities. "I can't live like this," Angela was overheard saying during one of their courtyard arguments. "This isn't what you promised me. Where's the luxury lifestyle? Where's the investment returns?" The young man, who had seemed so confident in the gym, now looked small in his wrinkled suit, unable to meet her accusing gaze. Liam's response revealed his own disillusionment. "You said you had access to all this money. You never mentioned it. Was tied up in federal mortgage applications." His voice cracked with frustration. "Now I'm facing federal charges because you didn't explain the whole story." Their attempts to maintain appearances in public became increasingly strained. During a mandatory court appearance, they sat as far apart as their shared defense table would allow. Angela refused to make eye contact with Liam, while he spent the entire session texting someone named Brittany. Apparently, his new training client from before, everything fell apart. The financial reality of their situation drove the final wedges between them. Unable to access any of the fraudulently transferred funds, they found themselves arguing over basic expenses. Who would pay for the motel room? How would they afford their separate lawyers? The romantic dream of shared wealth had turned into a nightmare of shared poverty. "I had a career before this," Liam complained to anyone who would listen. "Now I can't even get a job at a Planet Fitness." His resentment toward Angela grew with each rejected job application, each denied apartment lease, each dwindling bank account statement. Angela's own frustration manifested in increasingly public ways. During a meeting with their respective defense attorneys, she exploded. "He said he had connections. He said his investment plans were guaranteed. I gave up everything for his empty promises." The law firm's security cameras captured her outburst, adding another piece to the prosecution's evidence of their deteriorating alliance. Their social media accounts, once full of loving couples photos and optimistic posts about their future, told the story of their collapse. Liam unfriended and blocked Angela on all platforms. Angela's relationship status changed from "in a relationship" to "it's complicated" to finally "single." Each digital action documented their falling out. The final straw came when Liam's previous girlfriend reached out to him on social media. "At least Jessica never got me involved in federal fraud," he was overheard saying in the motel parking lot. Angela's response was to throw his remaining belongings out of their shared room, creating a scene that several guests recorded and posted. Online, their legal teams struggled to maintain a unified defense as their clients turned on each other. "My client was misled about the nature of these funds," Liam's lawyer argued in court. "He trusted Mrs. Harrison's assurances that she had the right to transfer the money." Angela's attorney countered by painting Liam as the mastermind, claiming his investment schemes had pressured her into moving the funds. The prosecution watched their deteriorating relationship with professional interest. "When co-defendants turn on each other," Special Agent Thomas noted, "they often reveal details they've been hiding." True to his prediction, both Angela and Liam began offering information about the other's role in the fraud, each trying to minimize their own culpability. Liam was the first to formally break ranks. Through his lawyer, He offered to testify about Angela's premeditation in moving the funds. She knew exactly what she was doing, his written statement claimed. She waited specifically until after the mortgage applications were submitted before transferring the money. Angela retaliated by revealing details about Liam's previous attempts to convince other clients to invest in his schemes. He had done this before, she told investigators. I wasn't the first person he tried to convince to move money into his investment plans. Her statement led to several other former clients coming forward with similar stories. Their shared dreams of luxury condos and investment returns dissolved into mutual recriminations. During one particularly heated exchange outside the courthouse, Liam shouted, "You ruined my life! I should have known better than to trust someone desperate enough to throw away their marriage." Angela's counterattack was equally vicious. "Trust? You're nothing but a con artist in gym clothes. You couldn't even afford your own protein shakes without scamming your clients." Their public meltdown was captured by courthouse security cameras, providing the FBI with even more evidence of their fractured alliance. The prosecution noted how quickly their romance crumbled under pressure. "It's typical in fraud cases," the lead prosecutor observed. "Once the money's gone and the consequences start, relationships based on financial fantasies fall apart pretty quickly." Their separate living arrangements became the final symbol of their failed escape plan. Liam moved to a different budget motel, unable to afford anything better. Angela swallowed her pride and moved back in with her mother. Their dream of sharing a luxury condo had ended in separate rooms in separate parts of town. Even their defense strategies diverged completely. Liam's lawyer began positioning him as a victim of Angela's deception. Angela's attorney suggested she had been manipulated by a predatory trainer who targeted wealthy clients. Their united front had dissolved into a battlefield of mutual blame. The unraveling of their relationship added new complications to the federal case. Each new accusation, each revealed detail, each bitter argument provided prosecutors with more evidence of their criminal intent. Their romance, born in a gym and fueled by financial fantasies, had become another exhibit in the federal case against them. While Angela and Liam's lives crumbled under the weight of federal prosecution, my own path took an unexpected turn toward success. The entire experience, though initially devastating, had become a catalyst for both professional growth and personal transformation. My reputation in the mortgage industry, far from being damaged by the scandal, actually strengthened. The way I had handled the fraud detection and reporting earned me respect among colleagues and regulators alike. Banks started referring their complex cases to me, trusting my attention to detail and understanding of federal regulations. "You've become our go-to expert on fraud prevention," Robert told me during a regional banking conference. "Everyone wants to know how you spotted the warning signs." I found myself being invited to speak at industry events, sharing my experience, and helping other mortgage officers recognize potential fraud patterns. The FBI's Mortgage Fraud Division began consulting me on other cases. Special Agent Thomas would call regularly, seeking my insight on suspicious transactions and documentation patterns. "Your case has become a template for how to handle mortgage fraud detection," he explained during one of our meetings. My own mortgage business flourished. Clients, impressed by my handling of the fraud case, referred their friends and family. "If he can protect himself from fraud that effectively, imagine how well he'll protect our interests," became a common refrain. My client list grew exponentially, each new application handled with the same meticulous attention to detail that had exposed Angela's scheme. The professional speaking circuit opened up unexpectedly. Financial institutions wanted me to train their staff on fraud detection. "Use real examples," they'd request. "Show us exactly what to look for." My experience had become a valuable teaching tool. helping others protect themselves from similar schemes. I expanded my office, hiring 2 additional loan officers and a dedicated compliance specialist. The increased business demanded it, but more importantly, I wanted to build a team that shared my commitment to thorough documentation and regulatory compliance. Every new hire went through extensive training on fraud detection and prevention. Industry publications began featuring my approach to mortgage processing. From fraud victim to industry leader, read one headline. The articles focused not just on the fraud detection, but on how the experience had led to innovative new protection protocols that other firms were now adopting. Local law enforcement started referring financial crime victims to me for consultation. Detective Brian Thompson, who had worked on Angela's case, often sent people my way. "Talk to Chris," he'd tell them. "He knows exactly how these schemes work and how to protect against them." My expertise extended beyond just mortgage fraud. Banks started asking me to review their internal procedures, looking for potential vulnerabilities. I developed a consulting side business, helping financial institutions strengthen their fraud. Prevention measures. Each new project built on the lessons learned from Angela's betrayal. The real estate community embraced my new role as a fraud prevention specialist. Having Chris review the documentation is like having an extra layer of security, became a common phrase among realtors. They appreciated how my thorough approach protected everyone involved in the transaction. I established a training program for new mortgage officers, focusing on the intersection of federal regulations and fraud prevention. The course quickly became mandatory at several local banks. "We want our people to have Chris's level of attention to detail," one bank president explained. "My personal growth matched my professional success. The experience had taught me to trust my instincts, to pay attention to small details, to maintain professional boundaries, even in personal relationships. These lessons served me well as I rebuilt my life. The house, which Angela had assumed would be lost in the legal battle, became my sanctuary. I renovated it completely, creating a home office that reflected my new status in the industry. The space where she had once plotted her escape became a center for professional growth and innovation. Financial success followed naturally. My expanded business, consulting work, and speaking engagements created multiple revenue streams. The money Angela had tried to steal seemed insignificant compared to what I was now earning legitimately. More importantly, every dollar was properly documented and fully compliant with federal regulations. My approach to documentation, once mocked by Angela as obsessive, became my trademark. Other professionals sought my advice on organizing their files, protecting their assets, maintaining clear audit trails. What she had seen as a weakness had become my greatest strength. The FBI's continued involvement in my professional life opened new opportunities. Other law enforcement agencies began consulting me on financial crimes. My understanding of both banking regulations and fraud detection made me a valuable resource for their investigations. Industry recognition came in various forms. Awards for excellence in mortgage processing, invitations to join prestigious banking associations, requests to serve on regulatory advisory boards. Each acknowledgement reinforced that I had turned a personal crisis into a professional triumph. My client base expanded beyond traditional mortgage applications. Financial institutions started referring their most complex cases to me, trusting my ability to spot potential issues before they became problems. My reputation for thoroughness became my greatest asset. The training materials I developed became standard resources in the industry. Banks purchased them for their compliance departments, mortgage companies used them to train new officers, and regulatory agencies recommended them for continuing education programs. My experience helped others avoid similar situations. Through consulting and training, I helped numerous professionals identify and prevent potential fraud attempts. Each person I helped felt like a small victory over the scheme that had tried to destroy me. The professional community that had initially sympathized with my situation now looked to me for leadership. I was elected to several industry boards, appointed to regulatory committees, and invited to contribute to policy discussions. My voice carried weight in conversations about industry standards and fraud prevention. Looking back, the experience had transformed me from a competent mortgage officer into a recognized industry expert. The very qualities Angela had belittled, my attention to detail, my respect for regulations, my careful documentation, had become the foundation of my success. 5 years after Angela's attempted fraud, I sat in my newly expanded office suite, reviewing the latest industry journal that featured my fraud prevention protocols on its cover. The article detailed how my experience had helped reshape mortgage fraud detection across the banking industry. The irony wasn't lost on me. Angela's attempt to destroy my life had instead launched me into unprecedented success. Special Agent Thomas dropped by for our regular consultation meeting, bringing updates about other fraud cases we were working on together. "You know," he said, settling into the chair across from my desk, "Angela and Liam's case is still required reading at the FBI Academy. We use it to train new agents in financial crimes." The federal case against them had concluded predictably. Both had eventually pleaded guilty to reduced charges, accepting plea deals that still carried significant consequences. Angela received 18 months in federal prison plus 5 years of supervised release. Liam got 12 months, his lighter sentence reflecting his somewhat lesser role in the scheme. Their post-release lives painted a stark picture of consequences. Angela, now working an entry-level position at a small print shop, couldn't get hired. In marketing again, her federal fraud conviction made any financial or client-facing role impossible. Liam had moved back to his hometown, teaching fitness classes at his parents' community center, the only place that would hire him with his record. "Did you hear about their latest appeals?" Thomas asked, pulling out a file. Both tried to get their financial restrictions lifted. Both denied. The federal banking system's long memory meant they still couldn't open normal checking accounts or get credit cards. Their attempt at financial freedom had resulted in precisely the opposite. My own life had taken a remarkably different trajectory. The mortgage company I'd built had expanded to 3 states, with a reputation for having the industry's strongest fraud prevention protocols. Banks regularly sent their complex cases our way, trusting our thorough approach to documentation and verification. The training programs I'd developed had become industry standards. Every month I conducted workshops for banking professionals, teaching them how to spot the warning signs I'd noticed in Angela's behavior. Her case had become a textbook example of mortgage fraud detection, studied by financial institutions nationwide. "Your case study is still the most requested at conferences," Robert mentioned during our morning meeting. He'd become my company's compliance director, helping implement the protection systems we'd developed. "Everyone wants to know how you caught it so quickly, how you documented everything so perfectly." The house Angela had tried to take had become the headquarters for my consulting firm. I'd converted the space where she'd once plotted her escape into a state-of-the-art training center. Financial professionals from across the country came to learn our fraud prevention methods. My personal life had flourished as well. The experience had taught me to trust my instincts, to value integrity over appearances, to understand that true success comes from building something legitimate and lasting. These lessons proved invaluable in every aspect of life. The banking industry's response to my story continued to surprise me. Regular speaking engagements, consulting requests, even a book deal about fraud prevention in modern banking. Angela's betrayal had transformed me from a local mortgage officer into a nationally recognized expert in financial security. Last week, I'd received an unexpected letter. Angela's mother, Camille, wrote to apologize again, but also to share news. "Angela talks about you sometimes," she wrote. "Not with anger anymore, but with regret. She finally understands what she threw away." The letter went into my file, another chapter in this long story. The federal regulations Angela had mocked as boring had become the foundation of my success. Banks hired me to review their procedures, to strengthen their fraud detection systems, to train their staff in spotting suspicious patterns. What she'd seen as tedious detail work had become a highly valued expertise. Liam's social media presence told its own story of consequences. Gone were the posts about financial freedom and investment schemes. His profile now showed him living with his parents, teaching basic fitness classes, his dreams of entrepreneurship buried under a federal conviction. Their Freedom Fund had bought them something very different from what they'd planned. Instead of luxury condos and investment returns, they got federal records that would follow them forever. Every job application, every housing request, every financial transaction would carry the weight of their choices. The real estate community had embraced my new role as a fraud prevention specialist. Having Chris review the documentation is like having federal oversight on your side, became a common phrase among realtors. They appreciated how my thorough approach protected everyone involved in the transaction. My expertise had extended beyond just mortgage fraud. Banks regularly consulted me on various financial crimes, trusting my ability to spot suspicious patterns. The skills I'd used to detect Angela's scheme now helped protect countless others from similar frauds. The professional speaking circuit had become a regular part of my life. Financial institutions nationwide requested my presentations, wanting their staff to understand exactly what to look for. "Show us the red flags," they'd ask. "Teach us to see what you saw." Perhaps the most satisfying aspect was how many people we'd helped protect. Our fraud prevention protocols had stopped numerous attempts similar to Angela's scheme. Each case detected early, each fraud prevented, felt like a victory over the betrayal that had started this journey. The legal community had taken notice too. Law firms hired me as an expert witness in fraud cases, trusting my ability to explain complex financial crimes to judges and juries. My experience with Angela's case had given me unique insight into both the technical and human aspects of financial fraud. Looking back, the experience had taught me invaluable lessons about trust, success, and true strength. Angela and Liam had thought they were being clever, but their scheme had lacked the one thing that creates lasting success: integrity. Their story became a warning to others, while mine became an inspiration. They showed where shortcuts and betrayal lead, while I demonstrated how integrity and expertise create real success. The contrast couldn't have been clearer. As I finished my final consultation of the day, I couldn't help but appreciate life's unexpected turns. Angela's betrayal had meant to be an ending. Instead, it had become the beginning of something far more significant than she could have imagined. The framed article on my wall said it best: "From fraud victim to industry leader, how one man's story changed mortgage banking." Below it sat the federal case number from Angela's conviction. A reminder that sometimes our greatest challenges lead to our greatest triumphs. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.